The scent of ceremonial oils hung heavy in the air, an oppressive mixture of amber and sage that caught in my throat and made my eyes water behind my carefully crafted dark glasses. These glasses were beautiful things. Obsidian frames inlaid with silver wire. They hid eyes that worked perfectly well but had pretended not to for 10 long years. For 10 years, I stumbled when there was no need to stumble. For 10 years, hands guided me through spaces I could navigate blindfolded. For 10 years, secrets swirled around me. The great hall buzzed with anticipation. Heat from hundreds of bodies pressed against my skin like a physical touch, and beneath the ceremonial scents lay the muskier, wilder aromas of my kind when they gathered en masse. Excitement, aggression, desire, fear. I could smell them all, cataloguing each one with the heightened senses that had become both my prison and my salvation. "Stand straight, Evelyn," my mother hissed, her fingers digging into my arm as she adjusted the ceremonial white shift draping my slight frame. The fabric was gossamer thin, revealing more than it concealed, a reminder that tonight we were reduced to our most primal selves. "The elders are watching. Every unmated female must appear appealing." I bit my lip, tasting copper as my fang nicked the delicate skin. A small act of rebellion. I nodded and straightened my spine, though what I wanted was to curl into myself, to become invisible. Elaborate braids crowned with white flowers had been arranged in my pale blonde hair, flowers that symbolized purity and fertility, as if we were offerings at an altar rather than women with minds and wills of our own. Reflexively, my hand went to the small pendant hanging at my throat, a smooth riverstone pierced and threaded on a leather cord. My grandmother had given it to me on her deathbed when I was only 7. "Water-shaped stone," she had whispered, her once powerful voice reduced to a rasp. "Not through force, but through persistence. Remember that, little one. Sometimes the softest things are the strongest." I had clutched that stone the day I realized what I was, what I could see that others couldn't. I had been 11 years old, watching as Councilman Richards transformed not into the massive silver wolf that was his public form, but into something darker, twisted, a creature of shadow that should not exist among our kind. I had gasped, and his head had snapped toward me, eyes narrowing. That night, I'd heard my parents speaking in hushed, frightened tones about the children who had gone missing over the years. All of them with the sight. All of them eliminated before they could expose the corrupted ones hiding among us. The next morning, I'd knocked over my breakfast, fumbled with my clothes, and walked into a doorframe. By afternoon, the whispers had begun. Poor Evelyn lost her sight overnight. Such a tragedy. A tragedy that had kept me alive. "It's starting," my mother whispered, and the murmuring around us faded as Elder Cassandra stepped onto the raised platform at the front of the hall. Her silver hair was pulled back severely from a face that had once been beautiful but now bore the hardened lines of a woman who had survived in a world demanding strength above all else. Tonight, her voice carried without effort to every corner of the space, "We continue a tradition as old as our kind. The mating ceremony connects us to our ancestors, to the primal forces that shape our existence. Tonight, some of you will find your other halves. Some will form alliances that strengthen our pack, and some," her eyes seemed to settle on me for a moment, and I forced myself to stare vacantly in her general direction, "will return to wait another year." A ripple of unease moved through the unmated females gathered at the front of the hall. We all knew what it meant to remain unchosen for too many years. The pitying looks, the whispers, the eventual relegation to the fringes of pack life, useful only for childcare and cooking, never to have a voice in council, never to run with a mate under the full moon. My sensitive ears picked up the sound of heavy doors opening at the back of the hall, and a new scent cut through the haze of oils and perfumes. Wild, untamed, like pine forests after rain and freshly turned earth. The unmated males had arrived, and with them the dominant ones, the alphas from neighboring territories, invited to strengthen bloodlines and forge new alliances. My mother's grip tightened. "Remember," she breathed. "If you're chosen, act grateful. If you're not, show no disappointment. And for God's sake, don't trip." The irony almost made me laugh. I'd spent a decade perfecting the art of the convincing stumble, and now I was being told to move with grace. But tonight was different. Tonight, I would need to be careful in new ways. Because tonight, for the first time, I would be close enough to the elders and visiting alphas to see their true forms. Close enough to discover how deep the corruption had spread through our leadership. Close enough to be discovered myself. The ceremonial drums began, a heartbeat rhythm that matched the pulse pounding in my ears. One by one, the females were called forward to stand before the assembled males. Some were claimed quickly. A male would approach, scent the female, and if both felt the instinctive pull of compatibility, they would exit together for the more private portion of the ceremony. Others stood in uncomfortable silence until Elder Cassandra dismissed them with a wave of her hand, their shoulders slumping as they retreated to the shadows. Evelyn Winters, Cassandra called, and my mother gave me a small push forward. I took a deep breath and began my practiced blind walk, tentative steps, one hand slightly extended as if feeling for obstacles. I'd performed this charade for so long, it was almost second nature. But tonight my heart raced with an added terror. What if after all this time someone noticed that my movements were too precise? That my reactions came a split second before they should? I felt dozens of eyes tracking my progress. Heard the murmurs of pity. The occasional snicker, quickly silenced. The blind wolf. They called me behind my back. A curiosity. A burden. I reached the center of the ceremonial circle and stopped, keeping my face carefully blank, my eyes unfocused behind my dark glasses. Through lowered lashes, I could see the assembled males clearly. Some young and nervous, others older with the confident stance of established pack members. And at the back, the visiting alphas, massive men with power that emanated from them like heat from a flame. One by one, males approached, circling me, breathing in my scent. I forced myself to stand still, to appear unaffected, even as I used my peripheral vision to examine each one. Some had the expected wolf shadow behind their human forms, the spiritual manifestation of their animal selves that only those with the sight could perceive. But others had shadows that writhed and twisted, that bore extra limbs or distorted faces or eyes that glowed with sickly light. The corrupted ones. I counted them silently, memorizing faces. 3 among our own pack males. 2 among the visiting alphas. More than I had feared, positioned so close to power. How many of the elders shared this taint? How far had it spread? The males moved on, none showing interest in claiming the blind girl with her blank stare and too-thin frame. I exhaled slowly, relief mixing with the familiar sting of rejection. One more year of safety. One more year to figure out what to do with my dangerous knowledge. Wait. The voice cut through the ceremonial space like a blade. Deep and commanding. The drums faltered. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Heavy footsteps approached from behind me. And a new scent enveloped my senses. Earth and smoke. And something metallic, like blood. The hair on my arms rose, and every instinct screamed, danger. Turn around, little wolf. I rotated slowly, careful to maintain my unseeing facade. Through my lashes, I saw him, taller than any man had a right to be, with shoulders that strained against the formal black attire worn by visiting dignitaries. His hair was the color of burnished copper, pulled back from a face that might have been carved from granite, but it was the shadow behind him that made my breath catch. Massive, ancient, a wolf form larger than any I'd ever seen, with eyes that burned gold even in the spirit realm. But pure, untainted by the corruption I'd witnessed in others. You're Alexander Constantine, Elder Cassandra said, her voice carrying a note I'd never heard from her before. Respect tinged with fear. Alpha of the Northern Territories. The man, Alexander, didn't acknowledge her. His focus remained entirely on me. His head tilted slightly as if puzzling out a mystery. She's blind, my mother called out, her voice thin with nervous tension. Born with the affliction. Surely you'd prefer silence, he said, without raising his voice or looking away from me. The command in that single word was absolute. My mother fell quiet immediately. He began to circle me slowly, and I fought to keep my breathing even, to maintain the vacant expression I'd perfected over years. But something was wrong. He wasn't just scenting me like the others had done. He was studying me, his gaze so intense I could feel it like a physical touch. Remove your glasses, he said quietly. The hall went completely silent. My heart threatened to burst from my chest. I keep them on for the comfort of others, I stammered, using the excuse I'd rehearsed countless times. My eyes are unsettling to some. I didn't ask why you wear them, Alexander said, his voice deceptively soft. I said, remove them. My fingers trembled as I reached up. I could feel the collective breath of the entire hall being held. Slowly, I slid the glasses from my face, keeping my eyes downcast, unfocused. A large hand came into my field of vision, calloused fingers gently grasping my chin. I flinched at the unexpected contact, but the grip remained firm, tilting my face upward. Look at me, he commanded. I hesitated, my entire body rigid with fear. In my peripheral vision, I could see Elder Cassandra watching with narrowed eyes. Could see the corrupted shadow of Councilman Richards shifting anxiously at the edge of the circle. Alexander leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for me. I said, look at me, little liar. My blood turned to ice. He knew. Somehow he knew. I raised my gaze slowly to meet his, no longer pretending, no longer hiding behind the veil of blindness I'd maintained for a decade. His eyes were amber, almost gold in the ceremonial firelight, and they widened fractionally as they locked with mine. For a moment, neither of us breathed. I saw something flash across his face. Surprise, intrigue, and something darker I couldn't name. The massive spirit wolf behind him lowered its head, ears flattening as if it too was studying me with new interest. I claim this female, Alexander announced, his voice resonating through the hall. Gasps and murmurs erupted around us. Elder Cassandra stepped forward, her face a mask of diplomatic concern. Alpha Constantine, perhaps you'd like to reconsider. We have many suitable females from prominent bloodlines. This one is mine, Alexander finished, his tone brooking no argument. By ancient right and tradition, I claim her as mate. The word mate crashed through me like a physical blow. Not just chosen for the night, for a political alliance or a temporary joining. Mate. The permanent, unbreakable bond, and I knew with terrible certainty that my carefully constructed deception had just shattered beyond repair. I stood exposed before the most dangerous man in the hall, the only one who had somehow seen through a lie I'd maintained for 10 years. As Alexander's hand closed firmly around mine, I realized I'd traded one danger for another, possibly greater one. The question was no longer whether I would survive the night with my secret intact. The question was whether I would survive at all. Alexander's grip on my hand was unyielding as he led me from the ceremonial circle through the parting crowd of stunned onlookers. My mother's face was a portrait of confusion, hope and fear battling across her features. I caught her eye briefly, saw the questions there, but Alexander's pace allowed no pause for explanations. The ceremonial drums resumed their beating, though the rhythm seemed faltering, uncertain, as if the musicians themselves were thrown off balance by the unexpected claiming. Behind us, Elder Cassandra called the next female forward, attempting to restore order to the proceedings, but the whispers followed us like shadows. The blind girl. Constantine took the blind one. Why would he choose each step away from the circle felt like walking toward my execution. The cool night air hit my face as Alexander pushed open one of the side doors leading to the gardens, the designated area where newly paired couples could share their first private moments. The sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine washed over me, a jarring contrast to the tension radiating between us. Only when we were alone, hidden among artfully sculpted hedges and stone benches bathed in moonlight, did he release my hand. I immediately put distance between us, backing away until I felt the rough bark of an old oak tree against my spine. My glasses were still clutched in my trembling fingers, and I resisted the urge to put them back on. That pretense was shattered now. Alexander stood watching me, his massive frame silhouetted against the silvery light, his spirit wolf pacing behind him, restless, powerful, yet still untainted by the corruption I'd seen in others. When he finally spoke, his voice was deceptively calm. 10 years, he said. That's a long time to maintain such an elaborate lie. My throat constricted with fear, but I forced my chin up, forced myself to meet his gaze directly. If I was going to die tonight, I wouldn't do it cowering. How did you know? A smile ghosted across his lips, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Your pupils dilated when I moved into your shadow. A blind person's wouldn't. Such a small detail. After a decade of careful deception, undone by an involuntary physiological response I couldn't control. I swallowed hard, mind racing through possible explanations, excuses, please anything that might save me from what was coming. What are you going to do with me? I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. Alexander tilted his head, studying me with those unnervingly perceptive eyes. That depends entirely on why you've been pretending to be blind for a decade, little wolf. The endearment, if it was that, somehow made the threat more potent. I clutched my grandmother's stone pendant, feeling its smooth surface against my palm. You wouldn't believe me if I told you, I whispered. Try me. I hesitated, weighing my options. The truth could get me killed. A lie might do the same, especially if he somehow sensed deception. But something in his steady gaze, in the pure, uncorrupted shadow of his wolf spirit, made me take the risk. I can see things others can't, I said finally. The words feeling foreign on my tongue after being locked away for so long. Spirit forms, true natures. I can see corruption. His expression didn't change, but I felt a shift in the air between us. A new tension, a new awareness. And what do you see when you look at me, Evelyn Winters? The use of my full name startled me. He'd been paying more attention than I realized during the ceremony. Power, I answered honestly. Strength, but not corruption. Your wolf is pure. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. He took a step closer, and it took everything in me not to flinch away. And the others? The elders? The council? I hesitated again, fear closing my throat. If I told him what I knew, there would be no going back. But hadn't I crossed that threshold the moment my glasses came off? Some are tainted, I whispered. Their spirit forms are wrong, twisted, malformed. Councilman Richards was the first I noticed when I was 11. There are others now, 3 among our unmated males, 2 visiting alphas. I don't know how many elders. I've never been close enough to see them clearly until tonight. Alexander's face hardened, a muscle ticking in his jaw. And that's why you pretended blindness? To hide what you could see. I nodded, my fingers still wrapped around my grandmother's stone. The children with the sight disappeared. I overheard my parents talking. They were being eliminated to keep the secret. So, I became blind overnight. A tragedy, they all said, but it kept me alive. For a long moment, Alexander was silent, his gaze so intense I felt stripped bare beneath it. Then he moved with the fluid grace of a predator, closing the distance between us in 2 long strides. I pressed back against the tree, heartbeat thundering in my ears, but there was nowhere to run. His hand came up and I flinched. But instead of the blow I half expected, his fingers brushed against the stone pendant at my throat. River stone, he murmured. Water and earth. Appropriate. My grandmother gave it to me before she died, I said, unsure why I was telling him this. She said water-shaped stone through persistence, not force. That the softest things can be the strongest. Something shifted in his expression. A softening around the eyes, perhaps. Your grandmother was wise. His fingers moved from the pendant to my cheek. A touch so light I might have imagined it. You've been very soft, haven't you? Bending, adapting, hiding, all to survive. I didn't answer, couldn't. His proximity made it difficult to breathe, to think. The wild scent of him filled my lungs, and beneath it lay something else, a note that called to something primal within me, something I'd spent years suppressing. Why did you claim me? I asked, needing to understand. If you knew I was lying, because you're extraordinary, he interrupted, his voice dropping to a timbre that seemed to vibrate through my bones. 10 years maintaining a deception that would break most people. 10 years watching, learning, seeing what others cannot. His thumb traced the line of my jaw. And because I've been looking for someone like you for a very long time. Confusion replaced some of my fear. Someone like me? Alexander stepped back, giving me space to breathe again. In the moonlight, his copper hair gleamed like fire, and the massive spirit wolf behind him seemed to watch me with the same calculating interest as its human counterpart. The corruption you see isn't limited to your pack, he said grimly. It's spreading throughout all territories. A darkness taking hold of our kind, twisting them from within. I've been tracking it for years, but I can only see the results, the behavioral changes, the unexplained cruelties, the disappearances. I can't see the corruption itself. His gaze fixed on me with new intensity. But you can. The implications of his words settled over me like a weight. You want to use me to identify the corrupted ones. I want your help to save our kind. He corrected, though the distinction felt semantic rather than substantial. Something is infecting us, changing us. If we don't stop it soon, there won't be anything left of what we once were. I wanted to believe him. Part of me, the part that had carried this terrible knowledge alone for a decade, desperately wanted to share the burden. But suspicion ran deep after so many years of hiding. Why should I trust you? I asked. For all I know, this could be a trap to identify those with the sight, so you can eliminate us, too. A low growl rumbled from his chest, the first true display of his alpha nature. If I wanted you dead, little wolf, you wouldn't still be breathing. The blunt truth of this statement sent a shiver down my spine. I had no leverage here, no power, no allies. If he meant me harm, there was little I could do to stop him. As if sensing my thoughts, Alexander's demeanor softened marginally. I claimed you as mate tonight for 2 reasons. First, to remove you from the danger you've been hiding from for 10 years. The corrupted ones in your pack can't touch you now without risking war with the Northern Territories. He paused, his eyes never leaving mine. And second, because a mating bond would allow me to offer you protection while you help me identify those who have been turned. A political arrangement, I said, surprising myself with the hint of disappointment in my voice. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. I didn't say that. Before I could process his meaning, a sound caught my attention. Footsteps approaching through the garden, moving with purpose. Alexander heard it too, his body tensing as he positioned himself between me and the potential threat. Councilman Richards appeared around the hedge, his human form impeccably dressed in ceremonial robes, his corrupted spirit shadow writhing behind him like smoke given nightmarish form. My stomach clenched at the sight of him. The first monster I'd ever seen, the reason for my decade-long deception. Alpha Constantine, he said, offering a respectful nod that didn't match the calculation in his eyes. The elders request your presence to formalize your unexpected choice. His gaze slid to me, and I forced myself to adopt the vacant stare I'd perfected over the years, though the glasses clutched in my hand rather ruined the effect. My choice requires no formalization beyond what tradition already dictates, Alexander replied, his tone deceptively mild. The claiming has been witnessed. The bond will be completed when we choose. Richard's lips thinned. Nevertheless, there are protocols, paperwork. Given the unusual circumstances, the council wishes to ensure everything is properly documented. I could feel the tension radiating from Alexander, though his expression remained neutral. Very well. We'll join you shortly. Richards hesitated, clearly wanting to insist on immediacy. But even he wasn't foolish enough to challenge an alpha directly. He gave another stiff nod and retreated the way he had come. When he was gone, Alexander turned back to me, his expression grave. He suspects something. Yes, I agreed, my voice barely audible. His shadow was agitated, more distorted than usual. Alexander's jaw tightened. We can't stay here. The moment we step back into that hall, you'll be under scrutiny like never before. One slip, one moment of recognition when you look at the corrupted ones, and they'll know. Fear clawed its way up my throat. What do we do? For the first time, uncertainty crossed his features. I need to get you to my territory where I can protect you properly. But to leave now without completing the formal rituals would cause diplomatic incident at best, open conflict at worst. And if we stay, I didn't need to finish the thought. If we stayed, the corrupted ones would discover what I could see, what I knew. They would eliminate me, as they had eliminated others with the sight. Alexander was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing our limited options. Then he reached for me, his hand cupping the back of my neck with surprising gentleness. There is a third option, he said, his voice low. One that would create an unbreakable bond they couldn't challenge. That would give you the full protection of my position. That would allow us to leave tonight without risking war. My pulse quickened. What? A true mating. His eyes held mine, deadly serious. Not the ceremonial version recognized by councils and treaties, but the ancient kind. Blood and spirit bound together. I stared at him, scarcely believing what he was suggesting. You want to actually mate with me? Now? Here? I want to survive the night with both of us intact, he corrected, though something in his gaze suggested there was more to it than mere survival. A true mating bond cannot be contested, not even by elders. It would give us the freedom to leave without repercussion. But we're strangers, I protested weakly. You don't know me. I don't know you. I know enough, he said simply. I know you've survived a decade of constant vigilance and fear. I know you possess a gift our kind desperately needs. I know your spirit is stronger than anyone gives you credit for. His thumb traced a small circle against the sensitive skin of my neck. What do you know of me, Evelyn Winters? I swallowed hard, trying to think past the distraction of his touch. I know you saw through a deception no one else ever questioned. I know your wolf is untainted by the corruption spreading through our kind. I hesitated, then added truthfully. I know you frighten me, but not in the way the others do. A smile touched his lips, genuine this time. Not exactly a ringing endorsement, but I'll take it. His expression grew serious again. Time is running out. Richards will return with others if we delay too long. I need your decision. Behind us, the sounds of the ceremony continued. Drums beating, voices calling out names, the occasional cheer when a successful pairing was made, and beneath it all, the sense of wrongness I'd carried for 10 years, the knowledge that corruption festered at the heart of everything I'd ever known. I looked up at Alexander Constantine, Alpha of the Northern Territories, a man I'd met less than an hour ago, who was now offering me both salvation and a bond that could never be broken. His spirit wolf watched me with ancient, knowing eyes. Yes, I whispered, the word barely audible, even to my own ears. But Alexander heard it, his pupils dilated, the amber of his irises nearly swallowed by black as his hand tightened slightly on the nape of my neck. Say it clearly, he commanded, his voice rough with something I couldn't identify. I need to know you understand what you're agreeing to. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the rough bark of the tree. I consent to a true mating bond, blood and spirit. The words hung in the night air between us, weighted with ancient power. The massive spirit wolf behind Alexander seemed to grow more solid, more present, as if my acknowledgement had given it strength. Once done, this can't be undone, Alexander said, his eyes never leaving mine. No council can dissolve it. No ritual can sever it. Even death only dims the connection. It never truly breaks it. A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with the cool night air. I understand. He studied me for a moment longer, as if giving me one final chance to reconsider, then nodded once. Very well. With fluid grace, he shrugged out of his formal jacket, draping it over a nearby stone bench. The white shirt beneath stretched across his shoulders as he moved, and I caught glimpses of tattoos at his collar and wrists, markings in an ancient script I couldn't read. When he turned back to me, his expression had changed, become more predatory, more intent. The true mating ritual is simple, he said, stepping closer. But old, primal. It requires blood exchange. And he paused, a hint of unexpected consideration in his eyes. And physical joining. Heat bloomed in my cheeks. You mean sex? Yes. The blunt word made me flinch, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Is that a problem? I wanted to appear worldly, unaffected, but the truth was I had spent a decade avoiding close connections of any kind. My deception had created a barrier between myself and others that had protected me from precisely this kind of vulnerability. I haven't. I began, then stopped, embarrassed. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're untouched. I nodded once, unable to meet his gaze. Alexander was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had gentled. That would have been discovered during the formal rituals anyway. Female purity is still valued in the old traditions. A touch of irony colored his words. Though I admit, I didn't expect it. No one wants to bed the blind girl, I said, a decade of hurt escaping before I could stop it. His hand caught my chin, tilting my face up to his. Their loss, he said simply. My gain. Before I could process his words, he was moving, backing me against the tree once more. But this time, his body pressed against mine, solid and warm and overwhelming in its proximity. His scent enveloped me, earth and smoke and male, and beneath it, something that called to a part of me I'd denied for too long, the wolf that lived within my human skin. The ritual begins with blood, he murmured, his lips near my ear, given freely, taken respectfully. His hand found mine, raising it between us. With deliberate slowness, he extended one claw, a partial shift that spoke of exceptional control, and drew it across my palm. The sting was brief, the cut shallow, but enough to draw a thin line of crimson that welled up against my pale skin. Alexander brought my bleeding palm to his mouth and held my gaze as his tongue traced the wound, collecting my blood. Something primal shuddered through me at the sight, at the sensation. His eyes gleamed gold in the moonlight. His pupils expanded until only a thin ring of amber remained. When he released my hand, he extended his own and shifted a claw on his opposite hand. Your turn, he said, voice deepened to a growl. With trembling fingers, I took his massive hand in mine. His palm was calloused, marked with old scars that told stories of battles and struggles I knew nothing about. I hesitated, then raised it to my lips and pressed a kiss to his skin before I could second-guess myself. His sharp intake of breath gave me a moment of feminine satisfaction, a power I'd never known I could wield. Emboldened, I drew his palm to my mouth, as he had done with mine, and dragged my tongue across the shallow cut. His blood tasted of copper and something else, something wild and ancient that seemed to burn through me like fire. As the taste of him settled on my tongue, I felt a strange sensation in my chest, a warmth that spread outward, seeking connection. Alexander's free hand tangled in my hair, dislodging the ceremonial braids. Now we join, he said, his voice barely human. Here under the moon, as our ancestors did. There was no gentleness in his kiss when it came. It was claiming, consuming, a brand of ownership I should have resented, but instead leaned into with a hunger that shocked me. My hands clutched at his shoulders, feeling the solid strength beneath fine linen, the barely restrained power in every line of his body. My ceremonial shift was gossamer thin, and I gasped against his mouth as his hands found the ties at my shoulders, loosening them with deft movements until the fabric slipped, pooling at my feet in a whisper of white. The cool night air kissed my bare skin, raising goosebumps that his warm palms smoothed away as they traveled down my sides. You're trembling, he murmured against my throat. I'm afraid, I admitted, the words escaping before I could stop them. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. Of me. I shook my head. Of everything. Of what happens after this, of being discovered, of the corrupted ones, of I stopped, unable to voice the deeper fear, the one that had haunted me for a decade, that I would always be alone with my terrible knowledge, forever separate, forever watching from the shadows. Understanding softened his expression. You won't be alone anymore, he said as if reading my thoughts. Whatever comes next, we face it together. That's what this bond means. The simple promise broke something open inside me. A dam I'd built around my emotions, my needs, my deepest self. Tears pricked at my eyes, and I blinked them away, unwilling to show that much weakness. Alexander saw anyway. His thumb caught a tear as it escaped, and he brought it to his lips, tasting my sorrow as he had tasted my blood. No more hiding, he whispered. Then his mouth was on mine again, and thought became impossible. His shirt joined my shift on the ground, revealing a torso marked with more of the ancient script, tattoos that spiraled across his chest and shoulders, down his arms, symbols of power and protection that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. When his hands found my breasts, I arched into his touch, instinct overriding inexperience. A soft sound escaped me, half pleasure, half surprise, and I felt him smile against my mouth. The little wolf has teeth after all, he murmured, his thumbs brushing over sensitive peaks until I gasped. What followed was a blur of sensation, his mouth trailing fire down my throat, across my collarbone, claiming each breast in turn until I was writhing against him. My hands explored the hard planes of his chest, the ridged muscle of his abdomen, learning him by touch as his fingers learned me. When he lifted me, wrapping my legs around his waist and pressing me back against the tree. The rough bark scraped my sensitive skin, but the discomfort only heightened the pleasure of his hands, his mouth, the solid warmth of him against my core. Eyes open, he commanded as his hand slid between us, finding the slick heat at the apex of my thighs. I want to see you. I obeyed, meeting his gaze as his fingers explored, teased, prepared. The intensity of his stare should have embarrassed me, but instead, it anchored me, keeping me present, as pleasure built in waves I hadn't known my body could create. When he finally positioned himself, the blunt pressure against my entrance made me tense involuntarily. His hand cupped my cheek, gentler than I would have expected from such a powerful man. Breathe, he whispered. Trust me. I did as he instructed, dragging air into lungs that seemed to have forgotten how to function. As I exhaled, he pushed forward, breaching the barrier of my innocence in one smooth thrust that sent pain lancing through pleasure. I cried out, my nails digging into his shoulders. He held perfectly still, his forehead pressed to mine, his breath coming in controlled, measured pulls that spoke of iron restraint. The worst is over, he murmured after a moment. The pain will fade. As if his words made it so, the sharp sting began to recede, replaced by a fullness, a pressure that hovered on the edge between discomfort and something else entirely. Experimentally, I shifted my hips and Alexander's grip on my thighs tightened. Careful, little wolf, he growled. I'm holding on to control by a thread. The power in that admission sent a thrill through me. I, who had been powerless for so long, could bring this mountain of a man to the edge of his restraint. Emboldened, I rolled my hips again, deliberately this time. His control snapped with a sound that was more wolf than man. He began to move, setting a rhythm that quickly built from gentle to demanding. Each thrust sent sparks of pleasure racing along my nerves, building towards something I could sense, but couldn't quite reach. As if sensing my frustration, Alexander shifted his angle, driving deeper, his hand slipping between us once more to circle the sensitive bundle of nerves at my center. Let go, he commanded. Give yourself to me, all of you. The double meaning wasn't lost on me. He wanted not just my physical surrender, but the surrender of my secrets, my fears, my entire self. And in that moment, pinned between his body and the ancient oak, I gave him everything. Release crashed through me like a tidal wave. My body clenching around his, my voice crying out his name to the night sky. As pleasure peaked, I felt something inside me shift, a connection forming, tendrils of energy reaching out from my core to twine with his. Alexander's rhythm faltered, his movements becoming more urgent, more primal. Mine, he growled against my throat, and then his teeth were there, breaking skin, marking me in the most ancient way. The sharp pain of the bite sent another wave of pleasure crashing through me. And I felt him follow, his body shuddering against mine as the bond between us flared to life. A golden thread connecting spirit to spirit. For a moment, I could see through his eyes, feel what he felt, the triumph of claiming, the satisfaction of connection, and beneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that took my breath away. Images flashed through my mind. A snow-covered forest, a stone fortress built into a mountainside. Wolves running beneath a full moon. Glimpses of his life, his home, his pack. As the intensity of the bond settled into a warm, steady presence in my chest, Alexander's forehead pressed against mine. Our breathing gradually slowing in unison. The bite at my throat throbbed, but not unpleasantly. A reminder, a claiming, a promise. It's done, he murmured, his voice rough with spent passion. You're mine now. My mate, my equal. Equal. The word echoed through me, strange and wonderful. After a decade of being dismissed, pitted, overlooked, to be claimed as equal by the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories, was almost too much to comprehend. As he carefully lowered me to my feet, my legs trembled, unaccustomed to supporting my weight after such intensity. Alexander steadied me, his hands gentle now as he retrieved my shift and helped me back into it, tying the shoulder strings with unexpected tenderness. Can you feel it? He asked, his fingers brushing the spot over my heart where the warm presence of the bond pulsed steadily. I nodded, unable to find words for the sensation of being connected to another being so completely. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once, to be known, truly known. After a lifetime of hiding. As Alexander dressed himself, rearranging his formal attire with efficient movements, I became aware once more of our surroundings. The sounds of the ongoing ceremony in the distance, the cool night air against my heated skin, the knowledge that beyond this moment of connection lay dangers we had yet to face. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Alexander's expression turned grim. "Now we return to the hall and announce the completion of our bond. No one can contest it. They'll sense its truth the moment we enter. Then we make our excuses and leave for the Northern Territories tonight. And the corrupted ones? Richards. We do nothing yet," he said, running a hand through his copper hair, loosened from its formal styling during our encounter. "We observe. We gather information. When we reach my territory, we plan." His eyes met mine, serious and intent. "This is larger than your pack, Evelyn. The corruption is spreading throughout all territories. We need to understand what we're fighting before we move against it." The weight of what lay ahead settled over me. A burden shared now, but no less heavy. "They'll know I can see them," I said quietly. "The moment we return, they'll look at me and know I've been lying all these years." Alexander took my face in his hands, his touch surprisingly gentle for one so powerful. "You've survived a decade of deception, little wolf. You can manage a few more hours. Keep your eyes downcast when possible. Speak only when necessary. Let me do the rest." I nodded, drawing strength from his confidence, from the steady pulse of the bond between us. I retrieved my dark glasses from where they'd fallen and placed them back on my face. A shield, however temporary. As we prepared to return to the hall, Alexander paused, his hand catching mine. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "remember that you're no longer alone. You have me now. My strength, my protection." He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my palm, where the shallow cut was already healing. "My life." The simple vow spoken in the quiet of the garden carried more weight than any formal ceremony could have bestowed. I felt it settle into the bond between us, strengthening it, deepening it. We were bound now, for better or worse. And as we walked back toward the hall, toward the corrupted ones who had hunted those with the sight for years, I found myself standing straighter, fear giving way to something new. For the first time in a decade, I was done pretending to be blind. It was time to truly see. We entered the great hall together, Alexander's hand at the small of my back, a gesture both protective and possessive. The ceremonial drums faltered as we appeared, the gathered crowd parting before us like water around stone. I kept my eyes lowered behind my dark glasses, but through my lashes, I could see the shadows of the corrupted ones shifting anxiously at our approach. Elder Cassandra stood at the center of the ceremonial circle, her silver hair gleaming in the firelight, her expression carefully neutral as we approached, but I could see what others could not. The faint distortion in her shadow, the subtle wrongness that betrayed the corruption that had taken root within her as well. 5 elders, 3 council members, 2 visiting alphas, and now I knew Cassandra too had fallen. The corruption had spread further than I'd feared, reaching the highest echelons of power within the pack structure. "Alpha Constantine," Cassandra greeted, her voice carrying throughout the hall. "We were beginning to wonder if you had reconsidered your choice." A low murmur ran through the crowd at her thinly veiled insult. Alexander's hand tightened slightly against my back, but his expression remained impassive. "There was nothing to reconsider," he replied, his voice calm, but carrying an undercurrent of power that silenced the whispers instantly. "The claiming is complete. The bond is formed." Cassandra's eyes narrowed, flicking between us. "A ceremonial bond requires witnesses, Alpha. The traditional rituals we performed." "No ceremonial bond," Alexander interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "We enacted the ancient rite. Blood and spirit joined under the moon. The mating is true and unbreakable." Gasps echoed through the hall. True matings were rare in modern times. Most pairs opted for the ceremonial version, which could be dissolved if necessary, which allowed for political alliances to shift and change with the needs of the pack. A true mating was permanent, uncontestable, recognized by all pack law as superseding any political consideration. My mother pushed through the crowd, her face pale with shock. "Evelyn," she whispered, reaching for me. I turned toward her voice, careful to maintain my blind facade for these crucial moments. "Mother," I acknowledged softly. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A true mating. But you barely know him. She stopped, unable to complete the thought in such a public setting. Blind, dependent, vulnerable, all the things she believed me to be. "I know enough," I said, echoing Alexander's words from the garden. "I've made my choice." Councilman Richards pushed forward then, his corrupted shadow writhing with agitation. "This is highly irregular," he said, addressing not Alexander, but the gathered elders. "The girl is disabled. She cannot fulfill the duties of a mate to an alpha of the Northern Territories. Such a union undermines the integrity of our alliances." A low growl rumbled from Alexander's chest, a sound so primal it sent shivers down the spines of everyone within hearing distance. "You question my choice, Councilman?" he asked, his voice deceptively soft. Richards faltered, realizing too late the dangerous ground he tread upon. "I merely suggest that in your enthusiasm you may have acted hastily. The girl is blind, she is perfect exactly as she is," Alexander finished, his tone leaving no room for debate, "and she is mine now, recognized by ancient law and tradition. Any further questioning of my choice could be construed as a challenge." "Councilman, is that your intention?" The threat hung in the air between them. A challenge to an alpha of Alexander's standing would be suicide, and everyone in the hall knew it. Richards swallowed hard, taking an involuntary step backward. "Of course not, Alpha Constantine. I meant no disrespect." "Then we consider the matter settled." Alexander's gaze swept the hall, challenging anyone else to voice objection. "When none came," he continued, "as tradition dictates, we will return to the Northern Territories tonight to present my mate to my pack. I thank you for your hospitality and for the honor of participating in your ceremony." Elder Cassandra's lips pressed into a thin line, but she inclined her head in acknowledgement. Protocol demanded she accept his decision, regardless of her personal feelings on the matter. "The pack extends its congratulations on your mating," she said, the words formal and empty. "May your union bring strength to both our territories." As Alexander guided me toward the exit, I could feel the weight of stares upon us, some curious, some envious, some calculating. The corrupted ones watched with particular intensity, and I wondered if they sensed something amiss, if they suspected that I was not what I had pretended to be for so long. My mother caught my arm as we passed, her fingers digging into my skin. "Evelyn," she whispered urgently. "Are you sure? You don't have to do this." "If he's forcing you, he's not," I interrupted, surprised by the certainty in my own voice. "This is my choice, Mother. I'll be safe with him. Safer than I had been here. Surrounded by corruption I could see but could not fight." "But your condition," she persisted. "How will you manage in a strange territory without me to help you?" For a moment I was tempted to tell her the truth, that there was no condition, that I had been lying to her for a decade. But the Great Hall was not the place for such revelations. Not with the corrupted ones watching, listening. "I'll manage," I said instead, squeezing her hand. "I always have." Alexander's voice cut through our exchange. "Your daughter will want for nothing in my territory," he told my mother, his tone gentler than I had yet heard him use with anyone but me. "She will be honored as my mate, protected as my equal. You have my word." Something in his manner must have reassured her, for she released my arm, nodding reluctantly. "Take care of her," she said. A mother's demand to an alpha who could crush her with a thought. "With my life," Alexander replied simply. As we continued toward the exit, the whispering followed us like shadows, speculation running wild through the gathered pack members. I kept my head high, my steps measured, fighting the urge to look back at the life I was leaving behind. 10 years of deception, of careful performance, of constant vigilance, gone in a single night. Outside, the cold air carried the scent of pine and distant snow. 3 large SUVs waited in the circular drive, engines running, men standing at attention beside them. Alexander's security detail, I realized, members of his personal guard who had accompanied him to the ceremony. One stepped forward as we approached, his posture deferential, but his eyes alert, assessing. Alpha, he greeted. Then his gaze fell on me, curiosity evident in his expression. Is this my mate? Alexander confirmed. Evelyn, this is Kane, my second in command. I inclined my head in acknowledgement, still maintaining my blind facade until we were safely away from the territory. Kane's shadow was pure, I noted with relief. A massive grey wolf that stood alert behind his human form. Everything is prepared for immediate departure, Kane reported, opening the rear door of the middle vehicle for us. We can be at the border before midnight if we leave now. Good. Alexander guided me into the vehicle, sliding in beside me as Kane closed the door. Only when the convoy began to move, putting distance between us and the packlands I had never before left, did I allow myself to remove my dark glasses. The interior of the SUV was dimly lit. But after so many years of pretending, even this small freedom felt enormous. Alexander watched me, his amber eyes reflecting what little light there was. You did well, he said quietly. They suspected nothing. I wasn't so certain. Richards was watching too closely. And Cassandra. Her shadow was agitated. They can suspect all they want, Alexander replied, his hand finding mine in the darkness. They can do nothing now. The bond is recognized. You're under my protection. The simple statement should have reassured me. But as the reality of what I had done began to sink in, anxiety clawed at my throat. I had left everything I had ever known. My home, my mother, my carefully constructed safety net of familiar routines and places to bind myself eternally to a man I had met mere hours ago. What happens when we reach your territory? I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. Alexander seemed to sense the fear beneath my question. His thumb traced soothing circles on the back of my hand. First, rest. You've endured more tonight than most face in years. Tomorrow we'll begin planning our next steps against the corruption. And us. The question slipped out before I could stop it. What happens with this? I gestured vaguely between us, unable to find words for the bond that hummed between us, warm and alive. Something softened in his expression. That depends on what you want, little wolf. I don't know what I want, I admitted. I've spent so long focused on survival that I never allowed myself to want anything. Alexander was silent for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. Then perhaps that's where we begin. Discovering what you want now that survival is no longer your only concern. The simplicity of his answer, the lack of demand or expectation, loosened something tight in my chest. I turned to look out the window, watching as familiar landscapes gave way to areas I had never seen. The moon hung low and full in the sky, illuminating forests and fields in silver light. There's something I should tell you, I said after a while, still looking out at the passing scenery. Something I saw tonight. When I was close enough to the elders. Alexander's posture shifted subtly, his attention sharpening. Tell me. Cassandra is corrupted, I said quietly. Her shadow is wrong. Not as severely as Richard's, but the taint is there. And she's not the only elder. I counted 5 in total, plus the 3 council members we already knew about and the 2 visiting alphas. A muscle ticked in Alexander's jaw. More than we thought. It's spreading, I said, voicing the fear that had been growing within me all evening. Whatever this corruption is, it's moving through the leadership of the packs like a disease. And if it's happening in your former territory, it could be happening in all of them. Alexander finished grimly, including mine. The implication hung heavy between us. If the corruption had reached his territory as well, we might be driving straight into another nest of enemies. Can you sense anything through our bond? I asked. Any wrongness in me? Alexander's hand tightened on mine. The bond is pure, he said with absolute certainty. Whatever this corruption is, it hasn't touched you. I would feel it if it had. Relief washed through me. At least in this, we were safe. What do you think it is? I asked. This corruption. Is it a disease? A curse? Something else entirely? Alexander's expression grew troubled. I've spent years tracking the changes in behavior, the disappearances, the strange decisions made by once rational leaders. My theory is that it's some form of parasitic entity, something that attaches to our spirit wolves and feeds off our power, twisting us in the process. A shudder ran through me at the image his words evoked. But where did it come from, and why now? Those are the questions we need to answer, he replied. And with your ability to see the corruption directly, we finally have a chance to do so. As the SUV ate up the miles between my old life and whatever awaited in the north, I found myself leaning against Alexander's solid warmth. Exhaustion catching up with me as the adrenaline of the night began to fade. His arm came around my shoulders, drawing me closer. Rest, he murmured. We have hours yet before we reach the border. I wanted to protest, to ask more questions, to begin forming plans, but my body had other ideas. My eyelids grew heavy, the gentle motion of the vehicle and the security of Alexander's presence lulling me toward sleep. Just before consciousness slipped away, I felt his lips press against my forehead. A gesture so gentle it might have come from a different man entirely than the imposing alpha who had claimed me before his peers. Sleep, little wolf, he whispered. I'll keep watch. I dreamed of running through moonlit forests, my wolf form, which I had never dared to fully manifest during my years of deception, racing alongside a massive copper-colored beast whose spirit I could feel entwined with my own. Freedom, power, connection. In the dream, we hunted shadow creatures that fled before us, their twisted forms dissolving like smoke when we cornered them. When I woke, the landscape outside had changed dramatically. Flat farmland had given way to rolling hills that rose gradually toward distant mountains, their peaks capped with snow even in summer. The air when I cracked the window was crisper, carrying the scent of pine and clean water. Where are we? I asked, my voice rough with sleep. About 20 minutes from home, Alexander replied. He had not moved during my slumber, his arm still a warm weight around my shoulders. How do you feel? I considered the question, taking stock of the various sensations coursing through my body. The mating bond hummed steadily in my chest, a warm presence that somehow felt both foreign and utterly right. My muscles ached pleasantly from our activities in the garden. And deeper inside, where fear had lived for so long, I found something unexpected. Hope. Different, I finally answered. Like I've been holding my breath for 10 years and finally allowed myself to exhale. Alexander's expression softened into something that might have been a smile on a less formidable face. A poetic description for a profound change. As the convoy rounded a curve in the mountain road, a structure came into view that made me catch my breath. Built into the very side of the mountain was what could only be described as a fortress. Ancient stone walls rising multiple stories. Towers watching over the approach from both sides. Massive wooden gates standing open in welcome. Wolf's Keep, Alexander said, a note of pride in his voice. Home to the Northern Pack for over 500 years. I stared in wonder at the imposing structure. My former pack had embraced modernity. Their headquarters housed in a sleek office building on the edge of town. This place spoke of history, of tradition, of a connection to our past that had been all but forgotten in the territories to the south. As our vehicles approached, figures emerged from the gates. Pack members coming to greet their returning alpha. I tensed involuntarily, my hand reaching for the dark glasses I had discarded hours ago. Alexander caught my wrist gently. No more hiding, he reminded me. You're my mate now. They will accept you as you are or answer to me. The simple declaration steadied me. I straightened my spine, determined to face whatever came next with the same courage that had kept me alive for a decade of deception. The convoy stopped in a large courtyard within the walls. Kane opened our door, standing at attention as Alexander exited first, then reached back to help me out. The gathered pack members watched curiously, their expressions ranging from surprise to confusion to wary acceptance. My people. Alexander's voice carried easily across the courtyard, commanding instant attention. I present to you Evelyn Constantine, my mate by true bond, joined under the full moon by the ancient rites. A ripple of shock moved through the assembled pack. True matings were rare enough, but for their alpha to return with an unknown female from another territory claimed so suddenly and completely was unprecedented. I could read the questions in their eyes, sense the uncertainty in their postures. An older woman stepped forward from the crowd, her silver-streaked dark hair falling in a heavy braid over one shoulder. Her face was lined with age and experience, but her eyes were sharp as they assessed me. Alpha, she acknowledged with a respectful nod to Alexander before turning her full attention to me. I am Helena, pack healer and keeper of records. Welcome to Wolf's Keep, Lady Alpha. The title sent a jolt through me. Lady Alpha. I had gone from the pitted blind girl to one of the most powerful positions in pack hierarchy in the space of a night. It seemed impossible, surreal. Helena's shrewd eyes missed nothing. Perhaps the Lady Alpha would like to rest and refresh herself before meeting the rest of the pack. The journey must have been taxing. Alexander nodded, recognizing the diplomatic suggestion for what it was, a chance for me to compose myself, to prepare for the scrutiny that would come. A wise suggestion. Show her to my quarters. I'll join her shortly after I brief the council on urgent matters from the Southern Territories. As Helena guided me into the keep, I cast one glance back at Alexander, suddenly reluctant to be separated from the one person who knew my truth. He caught my eye and gave a slight nod. Reassurance, promise, connection flowing through the bond between us. Inside the keep was a surprising blend of ancient architecture and modern comfort. Stone walls were hung with tapestries for warmth and acoustic dampening. Electric lights were designed to resemble old torch sconces. Wooden floors were polished to a warm glow and covered with thick rugs in rich colors. The Alpha's quarters are in the East Tower, Helena explained as she led me up a curving staircase. Best view in the keep, though I suspect scenery is the last thing on your mind right now. There was a knowing quality to her voice that made me wonder how much she had guessed about the sudden mating. I kept my expression neutral, unwilling to reveal anything until I had spoken with Alexander. It's been an eventful night, I said carefully. Helena's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. So it would seem. Not every day our Alpha leaves for a routine ceremonial visit and returns with a mate. She paused, studying me with those penetrating eyes. A mate with rather remarkable sight, if the rumors are true. I stopped short on the stairs. What rumors? Our Alpha has been hunting corrupted ones for years, Helena said quietly. He's gone to every territory, attended every major gathering, searching for something or someone to help him fight the darkness spreading through our kind. Word travels, even when spoken in whispers. My heart raced. If she knew about the corruption, about my ability to see it. You have nothing to fear from me, child, Helena said, her expression softening. I've served this pack for 60 years. I've watched the darkness grow, seen good wolves twisted into something unrecognizable. If you can truly see the corruption, if you've bound yourself to our Alpha to help fight it, then you are exactly what we've been praying for. Relief washed through me, followed quickly by weariness. After a decade of trusting no one, openness did not come easily. I need to speak with Alexander first, I said, neither confirming nor denying her suspicions. Helena nodded, resuming our climb. Of course, loyalty to your mate comes first. But know this, you are not alone in this fight. There are those among us who have been preparing for the battle to come. She led me to a heavy wooden door at the top of the tower stairs, pushing it open to reveal a spacious circular chamber. A massive four-poster bed dominated one wall, covered in furs and rich fabrics. A fireplace took up another section, already lit and warming the space. The remaining walls held bookshelves, weapons displays, and large windows overlooking the mountains and forests beyond. Rest, Helena advised. Bathe if you wish. Food will be brought up shortly. The Alpha will join you when he can. As she turned to leave, I found my voice. Helena. She paused, looking back over her shoulder. Thank you, I said simply. A smile touched her weathered face. Thank you, Lady Alpha, for giving us hope. After she departed, I stood in the center of the room, Alexander's room, now mine as well, and tried to process everything that had happened in the space of a single night. From hidden prey to Alpha's mate, from solitary deception to the center of a coming battle. I moved to one of the windows, gazing out at the vast wilderness that surrounded Wolf's Keep. Forests stretched for miles, giving way to snow-capped mountains that pierced the clouds. This land was wild, untamed, beautiful in its raw power, so different from the carefully controlled environments of the Southern Territories. My hand rose to touch the mating mark on my throat, still sensitive beneath my fingertips. The bond within my chest pulsed in response, a reminder of the connection that now defined my existence. For a decade, I had pretended to be blind, hiding my gift, disguising my strength, making myself small and unthreatening to survive. But as I stood looking out over the Northern Territories, I realized that chapter of my life had closed forever. I had spent 10 years in darkness of my own making. Now it was time to step into the light, to use what I could see to fight the corruption threatening our kind. Time to become not just a survivor, but a warrior. Not just a mate, but a leader. The door opened behind me, and I didn't need to turn to know it was Alexander. His presence filled the room, and the bond between us brightened with proximity. "They're waiting for us," he said quietly. "The council, the pack leaders. They want to meet the woman who sees what others cannot." I turned from the window to face him, straightening my spine, lifting my chin. "Then let's not keep them waiting." A smile spread across Alexander's face. Proud, fierce, and something else I was just beginning to recognize. Something that looked remarkably like love. "Ready, little wolf?" he asked, extending his hand to me. I placed my hand in his, feeling the strength in his grip, the warmth of his skin against mine. Ready. For the first time in my life, I truly was.